What's up, everybody? It's Corey, host of the Greaseball Podcast, back with another edition of the Performance Tiers, another bummer edition that's going to suck a man parts. So there's that. Another opportunity to clinch home field advantage against the 6-9 ass New Orleans Saints. And now it's going to come down to Week 18 against the Giants. Clinch home field advantage. So the week that shouldn't even exist. But hey, player safety, right? Even after we just saw a guy get CPR on the field, have cardiac arrest, and almost die. T's and P's for Damar Hamlin, by the way. Glad to hear he's doing better. So without further ado, let's get into the performance tiers for Week 17, which used to be the final week of the regular season before everything else I just said. If you need a reference point as to why the following tiers are named what they are, click the link above, and that will take you to the introduction to the performance tiers video, and we'll explain the following 4 tiers. So, let's start with, believe it or not, there actually is something in the Dawkins tier this week. Who would have known? Brandon Graham. For all the shit that went wrong against New Orleans, the defensive line actually continued to bring the heat, and it was 55 that led the way with 2 sacks. At 34 years old and coming off a torn ACL, BG's having the best year of his career, and he's now got a new career high in sacks after taking down Andy Dalton twice, reaching double digits for the first time in his career with number 10 and 11. This year's Eagles are now the only team in NFL history to have 4 players post double-digit sacks in the same season. Haason Reddick, Josh Sweat, Brandon Graham, and Javon Hargrave. And the squad's also got a new franchise record for sacks in a single season with 67 and counting. Basically the only bright spot in this fucking game. It also marked the 5th straight game with at least 6 sacks, which is fucking incredible when you really stop and think about it. So there's that. Defensive line continues to bring the heat week in and week out. And with BG leading the efforts, leading the way in this game, for his efforts, we've got him showing up as the only member of the Dawkins tier this week. Which brings us to the Chris Long tier. This tier was created for guys that are kind of the unsung heroes of the game, like the guys that don't exactly grab all the headlines, but that the game couldn't have been won without, hence Chris Long, who we love. And while he wasn't the best player on that defense the year the Eagles won the Super Bowl, the team wouldn't have been there without him. But for the first time since we've debuted the performance tiers, we've got nobody showing up in a single tier. Nobody's going to the Chris Long tier this week because nobody was an under-the-radar contributor in this game because the entire team, except for the defensive line, fucking sucked ass. So, that being said, moving on to the Aguilar tier where we find our guy, Coach Sirianni. Yo, we love Coach. And I understand that the team isn't 100% healthy with a couple key players on the shelf, but when you're the head coach, it falls on you to prepare the roster you've got. That next man up mentality that's preached across the league. And that's the thing. The Eagles didn't look ready to play whatsoever. I don't know if it was because they took the Saints for granted or if dudes were hungover because it was fucking New Year's Day, but it almost seemed like they just weren't there mentally. And again, I get the injuries. We all do. But you can forgive a loss if you see effort. The effort was there against Dallas, but it wasn't in this game against New Orleans. And ultimately, a 13-2 team was absolutely outworked by a 6-9 team, and that's fucking inexcusable. The cheeks of the cheeks, the worst of the worst, and there was a lot of the worst this week, the Chip Kelly tier, where we'll find Gardner Minshew. Minshew followed up a solid outing against Dallas with a disaster of a game. He went 18-32, 274 yards with a touchdown and a horrible interception, which was a late pick 6 by Marshawn Lattimore that basically put the birds to bed. And the O-line was out of sorts, which, I mean, look, that definitely didn't help. You had Minshew was regularly under pressure, but he looked pretty indecisive the entire game. You saw A.J. Brown voice frustration with being open and Minshew not seeing him. And it looks like Chris Sims was full of shit. Jalen Hurts and Gardner Minshew are not interchangeable after all. Possibly the worst thing to happen in this game, aside from the fact that we lost to a fucking 6-9 team, the Josh Sweat injury. This makes 3 straight weeks the Eagles have lost one of their most important players to injury. Jalen Hurts against Chicago, Lane Johnson against Dallas, and now Sweat against New Orleans. And that doesn't include Chauncey Gardner-Johnson and Robert Quinn, who are still out as well. Sweat went down with a neck injury in the first quarter, and those are always worrisome, right? And while you could see him move his arms and his legs, it's never a good sign when somebody gets carted off the field. Sweat was taken to a local hospital where he had movement in his extremities, and he took to Twitter to say that he'll be back this season, which is certainly, it's nice to see the confidence in his own health. It's certainly reassuring, but Sweat's a guy that's dealt with injuries in the past, and shit like this can always be precarious. We've seen what's happened this year with Tua in Miami. Coach Sirianni said he's day-to-day and will have to clear a protocol before returning either for Week 18 or in the playoffs. And I'd say it's a fairly safe bet that Sweat misses this Sunday against the Giants, which is now a necessary win to secure home field advantage. And what sucks about that is that while the defensive line as a whole has been literally historic this season, it's Haason Reddick and Josh Sweat that have been the tent poles for this defense this season, the most consistent two. And now one half of that tag team will potentially miss time, which adds to the injury report at the worst possible time of the fucking season. So there's your Saints game. There's Week 17 and the steaming pile of fucking feces that it was. And Week 18, you got the Giants at home. And the Birds have managed to take a 13-1 record and being the undisputed best team in the NFL and run it down to the final week of the regular season to possibly clinch home field advantage after failing to do so the last 2 weeks. As we've said, as everybody knows, yes, there's been injuries. We all know that. But that doesn't excuse the overall piss-poor performance against New Orleans, even with said injuries. The number 1 seed in the NFC is up for grabs against an inferior opponent whose first-round pick you own in the upcoming draft. And now it comes down to this. Week 18 against the Giants with that crucial week to get healthy on the line that is absolutely necessary now. Brian Dable, Daniel Jones, and company have clinched a playoff spot, but it's a division game, and when you see each other twice a year, there's something extra sweet about playing spoiler to a rival team. The Eagles dominated the Giants in Jersey last month, but I can't imagine that being the case this time. I mean, a few weeks ago we were talking about how Coach Sirianni would have to potentially consider who to play and who to rest when the regular season winds down, and now here we are. And yes, the playoffs are happening. It's a lock. But as of right now, despite controlling their own destiny, the Eagles are essentially playing playoff football going forward in that if you lose, there's serious consequences. The playoffs are one and done. And while if you lose to the Giants, you're still in, you rob yourself of the advantageous situation you've worked so goddamn hard all season to achieve. Having the NFC come through Philly is a massive advantage. The Link is one of the last remaining true home field advantages in the NFL. I mean, we all saw it in the playoffs in 2018, especially that Atlanta game. So, I don't know. 3rd time's a charm, maybe, right? Hopefully. And look, it's an opportunity. It's opportunity number 3 to lock up the number 1 seed in the NFC and to get back on track. You don't want to go into the playoffs with 3 straight losses, point blank. So only one opportunity left to get right. You still live to play another day, win or lose, but you got to get this first round bye locked down. Have the playoffs come through the Link and get motherfuckers back healthy and get this team back to what it was, what it can be. So what did you think of the game against New Orleans? What do you think is coming against the Giants this coming Sunday? Do you think Hurts is going to play? I think he does, absolutely. We need to lock this shit down. Let me know in the comments. A lot of playoff content, a lot of draft content coming your way. Hit the subscribe button. And the flagship, the Grease Bowl Podcast, comes your way each and every Monday on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Also airs here on YouTube, where you can see the playlist. Hit the subscribe button to not miss anything. We will see you next time. As always, go Birds.